So here's how I made building muscle easy after struggling for so long. And here's the reality, man. Most of my life, I was extremely skinny, but I always wanted a Greek god physique, or at least my version of that. I know you've seen Chris Hemsworth in Thor, or Brad Pitt in Fight Club, and those guys were jacked, shredded, and had insane physiques. And I saw that and I said I wanted that. But the thing is that I was just never able to. When I first started working out being a skinny fat kid, 130 pounds, I was one of those guys who coped and said I was a hard gainer. I would always say my metabolism's too fast. No matter what I did, no matter how much food I ate, I just could not build muscle or gain any weight or strength. But the reality is that I really wasn't a hard gainer. I just didn't have much appetite. So it felt like I was eating everything in sight. However, it was not as much as I thought. Pretty much every single night I had a food baby. I felt like puking, and I would go to the gym the next day, still not making any progress, still not progressing on any of my lifts. And I thought I was just destined to be a skinny kid for the rest of my life. I knew nothing about training. I knew nothing about nutrition, recovery, anything along those lines. And my ignorance led me to be in the same spot year after year. I was working out all the time. I was eating what I thought was healthy. But over time, I realized that there was much more to building muscle and building a Greek god physique than just working out and eating healthy. And over the years, things definitely started to click. I was doing more and more research. I was learning through trial and error. I was learning through experience. I was continuing to optimize things over time and just continue to refine my approach to a point where it doesn't just work for me, but also other people as well. And I'm showing you guys not only my transformation, but also some of the transformations of some of my clients, just so you know that I'm not some random guy on the internet with a good physique spewing random information that he learned on ChatGPT or something. So with this approach that's worked for me and my client, I'm really hoping that you can implement some of it and see some good results yourself. Because really, I know how frustrating it is to be putting in the work consistently year after year and not making any progress. Especially when you have this version of yourself that you know you want to look like, but can't seem to get there just based on the lack of information that you have. So in this video, there are 3 parts, and I'm also throwing in a bonus at the end that you can implement today to start building muscle, build that Greek god physique, or just become that version of yourself that you want to become. So before I get into everything on how to actually optimize your routine to build muscle, there's some things that you guys first need to understand. Building muscle is a long-term process. Like if you do everything right for a year straight, you'd be lucky to gain 5 to 10 pounds of muscle, like actual contractile tissue. However, it can make a decent amount of difference depending on what your starting point is. Because look at it this way, next time you go to the grocery store, look at how big a pound of steak is. And imagine 10 of those packed all around evenly on your body. It's probably gonna make a much bigger visual difference than you would expect. Another thing you need to keep in mind, since building muscle is a very long-term process, is that you can't compare yourself to the people you see on social media or even the most jacked guy in their gym, because the chances are that they've been working out for significantly longer than you. Maybe use them as a source of motivation, but don't be discouraged if you don't look like them after just a year or 2 of training, because you really cannot compare your chapter 1, 2, or even 3 to someone else's chapter 50. Since all you see is their end result, it's going to be easy to assume that what they achieved was an overnight success, which can make you feel discouraged, lack of motivation, and just feel like there's something missing within yourself. And I know this because that was literally me. I did this for so many years. I would always compare myself to the most jacked guy in the gyms, even if they were significantly older than me, working out a lot longer than me. I would still compare myself to them, and it made me feel like I was doing something wrong, or that there was something wrong with me in general. But as time went on, I continued to focus on myself and my own progression. I realized that the only things that they have that I didn't was knowledge and time. And the difference in knowledge between me and them came from them having significantly more time under their belt. So the point I'm trying to make here is that no matter how perfect you have everything in place, building a substantial amount of muscle is going to take a lot of time. So never compare yourself who has significantly more time in the game of working out than you. So now that that's out of the way and you guys have your expectations set right, let's get into the actual approach. So part 1, KISS. Now, if you don't know what this means, it means keep it simple, stupid. Because as a matter of fact, building muscle is extremely simple. Is it easy? No. But is it simple? Absolutely. I'm sure you guys have all seen these science-based gurus online preaching these weird, obscure exercises, saying that these are the absolute best ways to target that specific muscle, telling you that all the other ways are incorrect. I'm gonna tell you right now, all they're doing is just overcomplicating shit that does not need to be overcomplicated. All these exercises do really is just confuse people, especially the beginners. Now, I'm honestly super thankful that when I was getting into everything, starting to do my own research, that the whole science-based trend wasn't that big of a thing. Because if it was, honestly, I would be so overwhelmed with all this conflicting information, and I wouldn't know how to decipher between what was right and what was wrong. And honestly, I would have wasted so much time just trying all these unnecessary things, when in reality, the basic stuff is what worked. So really, I'm thankful that I've been doing this long enough that I can really see right through all the bullshit. Now, someone who is new to everything, or maybe even just been working out for a couple years, hasn't really done a whole lot of research, and they start seeing all this stuff on social media about these whole science-based lifting, then it's gonna be so easy to be distracted and stray away from the basics of what actually works. I've always been and always will be an advocate of sticking to the most basic exercises because they work and they always will work, so there's no need to stray away from them. And what you need to understand is that the more complex you make your routine, you make your workouts, the harder it is going to be to stick to. And when something is harder to stick to, it's harder to be consistent. Therefore, your level of consistency is not going to be where it needs to be in order to get the results that you want. The workouts I follow are extremely simple. Foods I eat are extremely basic, and I do this year round. So now you might be wondering, what are these so-called simple workouts and basic meals that I eat year round? Which leads me to part 2, the workouts. So when it comes to the training side of things, there are 4 main factors to consider: your frequency, your volume, intensity, and progressive overload. So let's first get into frequency. How often should you actually be training each muscle group per week? So when your goal is to optimize muscle growth, you want to ideally hit each muscle group twice per week, allowing for 48 to 72 hours of recovery before hitting each muscle again. The two splits that I honestly found work best are either push-pull legs or doing what I do now, which is chest back, arms, shoulders, legs, rest. Now the caveat here is that since you only have 48 to 72 hours of recovery in between hitting each muscle group, you need to make sure that your volume isn't too high so that you're avoiding overtraining and building up too much unnecessary fatigue. So now let's get into the actual volume. So now for the actual volume of each workout, I do 2 sets, 8 to 12 reps, going to complete failure within those 2 sets. Now I know this might not seem like a lot of volume. However, when you have the right intensity in place, you really don't need to have that much volume. Now you might be wondering, what does going to complete failure actually look like? So let me show you this clip right here. So in this clip right here, I honestly did not think that I would be able to get an extra rep. However, I still tried. So the end of all of my sets always ends with me not being able to get a full rep. And when I'm not able to do a full rep despite me giving all my effort, I know for a fact that I gave that set my absolute everything. And that is what your intensity should look like. When I say every set should be going to complete failure, that is what complete failure looks like. And when you hit failure, you want to be hitting failure within that rep range of 8 to 12. For me personally, I just found this rep range works best. However, some people do a little bit less, some people do a little bit more. I would say just trial and error a couple different things and see what your body responds with the most. But I would say if you don't know where to start with 8 to 12 reps. So now you know your frequency, you know your volume, you know your intensity. Let's get into the progressive overload technique that I use. So the exact progressive overload technique that I follow is that I basically do an 8 rep max. I find a weight that I can only get 8 reps with, then I stick with that weight until I can get 12 reps. Then once I am able to get 12 reps, the next time I perform that exercise, I increase the weight by either 5 to 10 pounds and stick with that new weight until I can get 12 reps. Then I just continue to repeat this process week after week, continuing to get stronger and utilizing that progressive overload. So in general, every single one of your sets should have the intent with either increasing the weight or increasing the reps of what you did last time. And I'm sure you guys are all probably tired of the saying, just train harder than last time, bro. However, it is extremely true. Now let's get into cardio really quickly. You might be wondering, how does cardio actually play a role in building muscle? So obviously cardio is not going to build muscle directly, and most people view cardio as just a way to burn more calories in a fat loss phase. However, there are some significant important factors to consider with cardio when it comes to building muscle. Number one is going to be endurance. The last thing that you want to have happen during your sets at the gym is for you having to stop the set early because you're out of breath. Now trust me, man, I've been there when I've been peak full. I had to stop my set of squats early because I was just too gassed. Not only is having shitty endurance unhealthy, but you're also leaving a lot of gains on the table. The second benefit of doing cardio when your goal is to build muscle is that it helps stimulate your appetite. And when you have a higher appetite, therefore it's going to be easier for you to get the amount of calories that you need to eat in. A third reason to make sure you're still doing cardio is that it improves your digestion and insulin sensitivity. And when your digestion and insulin sensitivity are good, the food that you do eat is going to be absorbed and partitioned more towards muscle growth instead of fat gain, which in turn is also going to help you stay leaner year round. And when you're leaner with better insulin sensitivity and digestion, you're going to be able to pack on a lot more muscle and gain strength quicker, as opposed to if you were fat, had bad insulin sensitivity, and your body just wasn't absorbing the nutrients like it should. So really there's no drawback to doing cardio other than just actually doing it. All I do is just 30 minutes of fasted on the elliptical every morning, and then between my 4th and 5th meals I go on a 30-minute walk later in the day, because I don't really want to burn through too much glycogen, but I also just want to be able to reap the benefits that I mentioned earlier. So don't be lazy, do your cardio year round, because I promise if you stick to it for a long enough period of time and stay consistent with it, you are going to have a better body composition and more muscle over time. So I know I went over everything pretty quickly. So on the screen here is a summary of everything I went over for you to take a screenshot of, so you don't have to keep coming back to this video and you can try it yourself. Part 3, optimizing your nutrition for muscle building. Now this is honestly where a lot of people have differing opinions and beliefs. You have one group saying eat as many calories as you can, another group saying eat at maintenance and main gain, another group of people saying eat in a slight surplus, a moderate surplus. So now everyone's wondering, what is the actual best approach? So look, man, I've done it all. I've dirty bulked when I first started. I main gained for years and years back when I was going to raves and festivals and just wanted to stay lean year round. And of course I've done the moderate or even low surplus. Before I tell you the caloric intake that I found works best for me and my clients, let me first tell you the ones that I found the least amount of success with. So I'm going to be honest, I can tell you the 100% certainty that I saw by far the least amount of progress when I was main gaining. And I did it for about 3 to 4 years and probably only packed on about 5-ish pounds of muscle. However, the main benefit I saw with main gaining is I was staying around 10% body fat year round and look good shirtless pretty much all the time. Now really, if your main goal is just to stay lean year round and make very slow progress, main gaining might be the best approach for you. However, if your goal is to actually optimize building muscle, I would go with another approach. And for me personally, I am someone who likes to see those significant improvements in my physique year after year, even if that means looking worse for a short period of time during a bulk. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when I first started out, my first ever bulk was a dirty bulk. And did I build a decent amount of muscle and get very strong? Absolutely. However, do I necessarily recommend it for everyone? Absolutely not. Because honestly, the cut I had to do after that dirty bulk made it not even worth it. And now that I think about it in the long term, I probably could have made significantly more progress if I just went about the bulk in a proper way, so I didn't have to spend nearly half a year cutting. Like, I really don't recommend dirty bulking at all because, like I said earlier at the start start of the video, building muscle is a very slow and long-term process, and you can't speed that process up just by eating as many calories as you can. If you do that, all you're gonna be doing is just packing on unnecessary amounts of fat, and it's just gonna make your next cutting phase a living hell. Now, what I do now is actually a moderate surplus. I know a lot of you guys are gonna think I was gonna say a slight surplus. However, I just found the most success keeping the surplus at around 300 to 500 calories. However, I'm not so focused on the scale, but rather just my gym performance, as well as maintaining a decent body composition. The scale can be a measurement of progress. However, it's definitely not the only one. If you're getting stronger in the gym, not putting on a bunch of fat, and slowly gaining weight, then in turn, you're most likely gonna be building muscle. Like personally, I would rather slightly overshoot my surplus and gain a little bit of extra fat, because if you undershoot your surplus, there might be some periods of time where you're eating at maintenance and not making very much progress. And another thing you need to keep in mind is that losing fat is a significantly quicker and easier process than building muscle. So I would rather make sure that during my bulk that I am getting as much progress as I can, because I know with the extra fat that I gain that I'll have no issues being able to lose it. Now, if you are someone who does struggle with losing fat, I also have another video in fat loss that goes over pretty much everything you need to know about losing fat in detail. So I'll link that down in the description if you want to check that one out. Now, here's how to actually find your specific caloric intake. So I recommend just really going online and searching up a TDEE calculator, putting in your stats, seeing what maintenance calories it gives you. Since those calculators aren't always super accurate, see how your body responds to just a 300 calorie surplus based on the numbers that it gave you. And if you're gaining weight too quickly, lower the calories a little bit. If you're gaining weight too slow, up them a little bit. So now that you know how many calories you should be eating, let's go into the actual specific food choices, and then we'll get into the macros. So I'm always going to be an advocate of eating clean year round. Single ingredient, whole foods. Not only that, but also just foods that agree with your body. Now, for time's sake, I'm really just going to put up my entire meal plan of what I'm eating right now. Comes out to about 4,000 calories per day, just so you guys can get an idea on the specific things that I eat. Now, I wouldn't recommend eating the exact meal plan that I eat because our bodies and our metabolisms are different, but what you can do is pick and choose some of those meals or even food choices and see if you like them for yourself and how your body agrees with them. But all in all, make sure you're prioritizing single ingredient whole foods, because the cleaner you eat, the better your body's going to be able to absorb those nutrients, and therefore the more muscle that you're going to be able to build. Now let's get into your actual macros. A good rule of thumb to follow is about 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Now personally, I just want to make sure I'm not leaving any gains on the table, so I have no problem overshooting my protein intake because my digestion can handle it, and I'd rather make sure I'm getting too much protein as opposed to not enough. But really a good starting point for you, I would say, would be about 1 gram protein per pound of body weight. Now for fats, a good starting point would be 0.3 grams per pound of body weight. Now when I showed my meal plan earlier, you might be wondering where are all the fats at. The thing is that I found that my body responds very well to keeping my fats as low as possible, just to really cover all my bases. And I really just leverage carbs and protein to optimize gym performance and recovery. Now to find the amount of carbs that you should be eating, literally just fill in the rest of your calories with carbs. I've made a much more in-depth video on how to actually calculate your macros, so I'm not going to get into too much details here just for time's sake, but I'll put that video in the description as well as put a screenshot on the screen of the formula that you can use to calculate your macros. So really when it comes to nutrition, the general rule of thumb that I have for my meals is that I have a designated carb source, designated protein source, and a designated fat source if that meal has added fat. It really just makes everything so much more simple doing it this way. So as per usual, I put on the screen here a summary of everything I went over for you to take a screenshot so you don't have to keep coming back to this video. All right, so part 4, the bonus. And really, I do not know why more people don't talk about this aspect, not even just in terms of building muscle, but just fitness in general. And that's gonna be your digestion. Now, since you're in a surplus prioritizing muscle growth, the last thing you want to have happen is for you to feel bloated all the time, you're gassy, your stomach just feels constantly inflamed all the time, and it's really just an uncomfortable feeling. And trust me, man, when I was doing that dirty bulk years ago, I know exactly how shitty that feels. And since I placed such a high emphasis on digestion, that is why I was preaching eating clean so heavily earlier. So really, it's not just about how many calories that you eat, but how your body is able to absorb those calories. You want to make sure that you're eating foods that agree with you. Like for me personally, chicken agrees very well for me, and beef doesn't so much for whatever reason. When I eat beef, I get super gassy, I get bloated, sometimes I even get acne for whatever reason. So I always just stick with chicken. Same thing with protein powder. I don't really do whey protein powder. I use egg white protein powder because I found that when I was having whey protein powder, I would break out all the time, I would get gassy, I would fart all the time. I was just super uncomfortable, so I cut out whey protein altogether. And if you don't know if your body's digesting the food properly, just take some of those symptoms that I just talked about earlier and see if you're experiencing them. Like if you eat a meal and you're gassy, you're bloated, you're getting acne, diarrhea, or just any sort of normal digestion issues, you probably want to cut that food altogether out, maybe even try a different brand, or just figure out some sort of solution, because you want to make sure that you're optimizing your digestion as much as possible. Now, if you really want to optimize your digestion even more beyond just eating foods that agree with you, do your fasted cardio like I mentioned earlier, up your fiber intake, drink more water, go on short walks in between your meals, or even start taking some digestive supplements. The supplement that I use on occasion for digestion, beta-E and HCl. And the other supplement that I take to optimize my digestion is that I have 10 grams of glutamine in the morning. So year round, my digestion is really good, and I know my body is absorbing the nutrients that I eat properly. So seriously, do not overlook your digestion, because like I mentioned earlier, how good your body digests the food is just as important as the food itself. And that pretty much sums everything up that you need to know about building muscle. And yes, it really is that simple. Is it easy necessarily? No. Does it take a lot of time? Absolutely. But regardless, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you you found some of this stuff valuable. I hope you actually implement it and start seeing some good results. And with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video.